Well, folks, we're back, and we hope that you've had plenty of sleep and plenty to eat because there has been a ton of tennis. But get ready because there is more tennis. This is Eat Sleep Tennis. I'm Alex Christensen, and joining me, as always, from the other side of the world, and give him a break here, folks. He's currently sweating Muguruza here is 5-5 and just got broke serving to win the match in the third set against Osaka. But on top of that, he's all tired. He was actually at tennis. He was watching tennis. He was there, folks, when they were kicking people out, I think, at midnight. Hopefully you left a little sooner than that. But your voice was hoarse, apparently. We were supposed to do this yesterday, but here we are. How's it going, Steve? How's the Australian Open been? How are things in Melbourne? And did I say it right this time?
You did. Look, it's been good. It's been a lot. It started well with obviously the crowds there and having atmosphere, but things have obviously tempered off a bit at the moment with the no crowds for the next, 4 more days. So we'll see how that impacts kind of the play as well. And, that lack of atmosphere might help a couple of players who maybe don't handle the pressure as well. But look, it's just exciting to see there's another tournament ready to go for the second week for the women who perhaps didn't make it through the first week of the Australian Open.
Love it. Also joining us, Candace. How are things? How are we doing? Do we have a chair yet, or are we still sitting on the floor trying to make things work? We might have a dog visit today.
We are still on the floor. I don't think we'll have a dog visit because we got a lot of snow here. We're snowed in, and the dog loves the snow. So she tired herself out running and jumping through the snow all day. So she's pretty tuckered out. I just peeked on her before we went on, and she was sound asleep in bed. So we're probably free from that. And I am feeling nice relief mid-Australian Open. Unlike Steve, who's sweating through things today, I have a free day till tomorrow on that front.
I also actually took today off. I'm just excited to watch the Sabalenka Serena match. It's going to come after this one. This one has been spectacular as well. And Osaka here up now 40-love at 5-5. I'm hoping she holds while I'm talking because then I can lock in my tiebreaker bet and my Osaka 7-5 bet. Nothing better than a free roll, guys. But we're not here to talk about that. There's, in fact, another tournament in Melbourne. This is actually Melbourne 4, as much as I made the joke that was the Australian Open. There is a real Melbourne 4. And Steve, what the hell is Phillip Island?
Phillip Island is an island just, about a 75, 80-minute drive southeast of Melbourne. So, look, they've just decided to name all these places or these tournaments that, based on places that are around kind of regional Victoria. So this one got the Phillip Island treatment.
Steve has come to, I think, expect that you're going to ask him what all these places are because that was a very concise answer.
Correct.
He should. He
Sharp
should.
to the point.
That's my favorite part is, doing the same surprise over and over again to see if you guys.
What does it sound like to
job.
you, though, Alex? Does this sound like a golf course, too? Maybe mini golf?
Not really. I mean, a little bit. Like, I don't know who Phillip is. Like, Phillip isn't a name you'd put on a golf course. Like, usually it's some, more refined kind of thing. I don't know. I don't know who Phillip was. Steve, do you know who Phillip was?
Are we going back through this again? I don't know. I'm assuming it's to do and linked with Port Phillip. But let's move on to the tennis, shall we?
All right, fine. Just trying to distract you to see. Muguruza's got 2 games here. It's now 40-30. So this is a big game here. Do we go to deuce or does Osaka hold? But instead, we have the first quarter here of Phillip Island. Sophia Kenin, the first seed here with a bye. Danielle Collins there at the bottom with a bye. Some interesting names kind of there in the middle. But I'll let you start here, Candace, while we watch Steve sweat. What do you see here in this section?
Well, I mean, I think the big thing that you see, obviously, right at the top is Sophia Kenin. It's no surprise, I suppose. I feel like I've been against her since she's come back for the new season. I just have not been impressed from day one from what we've seen of her. As expected in the Australian Open, that didn't get any better. She doesn't necessarily have a hard draw, which she's been privy to easy draws all year and still hasn't been able to do anything with it, which is even more concerning to me. I'd imagine the winner of the Potapova-Peterson match is the one I'd be looking towards. I just took a peek, and it looks like Peterson is up a break in the third. So who knows who it'll be out of that match, but that would be the person that I'd be looking to there on the top. As far as the bottom goes, I do think that's a pretty facile portion for Danielle Collins. Once Caroline Garcia lost, it really opened things up for her. So I'd be looking for Collins on the bottom, and then whoever makes it through that Potapova-Peterson match. But it does look to be the Swede at the moment.
Yeah, I like Collins here. I think this sets up very nicely for her. And I actually think Minen might be a little more competitive on some of these faster courts. But Peterson's funny. She's someone that's been hard to kind of put a finger on. Now, Steve, did you have a chance maybe to watch her play at all when you were there? Otherwise, if not, I mean, what do you see here? How do you see this kind of coming together?
Look, I think when you look at this section, and it's obviously hard to get a bit of a gauge for some of these players, that motivation level after coming off the loss out of a Grand Slam can be a little bit tricky. When you look at Kenin, she's at the top there, but her on-court body language and just general demeanor probably doesn't instill you with a whole lot of confidence. I don't think, going into a smaller tournament like this, I think when you do look at this, if you did have to go off recent form, Danielle Collins is the one, but it is, I guess, hard to kind of gauge with this that, who wants to just kind of get out of the country and be done with the last couple of weeks that they've had in Melbourne and who wants to stick around. From a draw standpoint, and I agree with Candice around this Potapova-Peterson match being one that is going to kind of gauge a little bit, I think, to the top part of this section. But I think when you look to the bottom, it is Danielle Collins to lose. If she wants it, I think she gets it.
Yeah, it's something you see in a lot of tennis tournaments, frankly, and any format that has a draw or a bracket like this. You look at certain first round things, and you would really like both players. Unfortunately, they come together. Both of them are players again that, if they're healthy and playing well, have a chance to make a run here. Sofia Kenin is just. I really, as someone who's a big fan of the United States tennis and was really excited that Sofia Kenin might be kind of our, worst case scenario for the best women's player from a U.S. perspective, really concerns me. I didn't love some of her comments about Kanepi, let alone her performance there. Has looked, off kilter, not quite herself this year. And hopefully this is just a tournament where she kind of puts it together. As you look at this draw, if she is playing well, she's got Gadecki there in the second round, a nice young Australian talented player, but someone Kenin who should just be a little too much of a professional for, frankly, in that match, for lack of a better way to say it. And you look at the rest of this draw. I mean, Collins is playing some great tennis. And I think she has a chance to, maybe red line through that match, but I hope this is maybe, I hope we see Sofia Kenin play some good tennis again. That's kind of what I'm hoping for here. But again, I agree with you guys, and I think we've kind of stacked hands here. If I did have to pick somebody, given her form and kind of her draw here, she's in the easier section. This is a great spot for Collins.
Definitely. And I think one thing to notice with Kenin was it wasn't so much, I mean, obviously her body language during the match with Kanepi was an issue, but also her comments about the match before it. I think she'd mentioned that she had a bit of a mini breakdown when she saw that she was going to have to play Kanepi. And I don't know, it just doesn't feel like the type of thing you should be saying before you step on court against someone at the top level. But maybe that's just me.
As someone who would have described her as mentally tough until that moment, it was certainly out of character and something I never expected to hear or see from her. She really seemed to have a sort of a killer instinct, and that is not something I expected. That said, are we ready to move to the next section? And Steve, maybe I'll give you a break. Have you checked the score?
I have checked the score. I'm not too surprised, I think, with how that finished off. Obviously, with Osaka beating Muguruza 7-5 in the third there. I think the worst thing that could have possibly happened to Muguruza there was to have double match point on Osaka's serve before trying to serve it out. So it hasn't ended particularly well there, but that's all right. We can move on to the second quarter here.
Just another big underdog. You almost got there. There was absolutely value in that number. So unfortunately, didn't get there, but that was definitely a good snag by you. As we take a look at this section, Martic here at the top, Pavlyuchenkova at the bottom with the buys. Kasatkina is the name that sticks out to me in the middle here. I think she has a chance to maybe make a run here. But what do you see here, Steve?
Well, I guess while we're going live here at the moment, Kimberly Birrell has just knocked out Elise Cornet. So it has kind of opened up things a bit here in this particular quarter. I am gravitating towards Kasatkina. I think the form around, pushing Sabalenka, I think last week at the Australian Open, and her just general form in these conditions has been pretty impressive. And when you look at this section, there's a lot of qualifiers. Could maybe make a case for Tomljanovic if she can back things up quickly. But look, for me, I think I'm gravitating towards Kasatkina, and it'd be good to see Petra Martic get some match practice under her belt. But with a bye first round, she's not spending a lot of time on court.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I mean, Candice, what do you see here?
Very similar thoughts for me. There are a few people who you'd like to have gotten a little bit more match experience at this stage. I do think Kasatkina is the one who does stick out on paper to me when you do take a peek at this group of names. She obviously was playing very well. I think we all thought that she would have made it further into the Australian Open itself than she did. So to see her here, obviously a much softer spot, a host of names that she should be able to handle. I do think that she'd be the one to have in this group.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of fun, actually, that we have kind of all the Russians there at the bottom. I was actually trying to pull up here quickly. I can't remember the last time Pavlyuchenkova won a tournament. I don't know if any of you guys remember, but it's been quite some time
ago.
It'd be a long time ago. I mean, she does
2018. 2018, she won a tournament on clay, and 2017 was her last hard court win. She's got the bye here. I think she has a chance to beat Tomljanovic, who I expect to beat there. And then that match with Kasatkina, I think, could be kind of a coin flip. I think that I'm excited to watch. And Martic has been kind of disappointing. She has some talent. Maybe she could win this section, but I expect whichever Russian here comes out of the bottom to advance and take care of business. Yeah. Any thoughts from you guys here before we move forward?
No, I think we can move on to the third quarter.
Beautiful. Shuai Zhang at the top, Jo Konta at the bottom, Marie Buzkova there in the middle, who I think we'll be talking about a little bit. What do you think there, Candace?
Definitely going to be talking about Buzkova a little bit in this spot. Spoiler alert, she's who I actually wound up picking to win the tournament. Obviously had the very comfortable first round with the retirement of Kovnich there in the first. So able to make it through there very easily. Plays the winner of Irani or Zhu. So that shouldn't be too difficult either. Jo Konta there on the bottom, but again, a player who has not necessarily impressed in recent times. So I do think there's a pretty soft portion of the draw if Buzkova can make something of it. You look back to her playing over at the Australian Open, and she was in one of those first round matches that we spoke about that was going to be very difficult against Svitolina. And I thought she acquitted herself quite well there in defeat. So I'm really taking a keen eye with Buzkova again here against easier foes after she, I think, drew the short end of the stick on the draw front for the big one.
It's interesting as I look at her draw. I think I like this section. There's a lot, I think, to be learned here from watching this group of players. Shuai Zhang has really come out cold, but she's generally someone who is going to be somewhere in that 80 to 100 range in the WTA Tour. And this is kind of a tournament where she might have some success. Somebody like Teichmann, who I was maybe more bullish on from a hardcore perspective, could also have a chance to run through here. Who knows if Sarenko has anything left in the tank? Is this one of those kind of funky tournaments where Shuai Zhang comes out of nowhere and just starts beating people? Again, Buzkova was one of my favorite players on hard courts in 2019, kind of rough in 2020, but I think is finding herself a little bit this year. That Jo Konta-Sasnovich match just makes my head hurt. I don't really know what to do with that. But I think this does set up nicely for Buzkova. I think she's the best player here. I kind of think Zhu taking out Irani is actually a little bit better for Buzkova here. She can just kind of throw a bunch of variety at Zhu there, and I think that'll be fine for her. So I'm on board there as well. Buzkova looks nice. How about you, Steve?
Yeah, look, if I'd be repeating basically everything the two of you have said. If I went into too much detail here, I do like Buzkova as well. I think it's the most consistent player here. I think that you can trust to kind of deliver a decent level. She pushed Barty to 3 sets in the week before the Australian Open as well. So, she's comfortable on the course, comfortable in the conditions, and there's just too many question marks, I think, around the rest of this portion of the section.
Absolutely. Anything else stick out to you guys here? Anything else we want to cover before we jump into the fourth?
Nope.
Last section, Andreescu playing some more tennis and what I'm considering kind of her preseason, frankly, based on what happened. But get ready, Steve. We'll jump to you since we actually got to watch some of her playing tennis. Wang Jiang there at the top. Some kind of interesting names there in the middle. But as mentioned, Steve, what did you see when you got to watch BVA play last week? And what do you think we might expect here? Because it's a very manageable draw. I mean, if she is able to play herself into a little form and get herself into kind of some shape here, I mean, she has a bye. Brengel is absolutely no problem. You look at that next group, I don't see anything there. Nobody in the top kind of bothers you. So what did you see and what are you expecting this week?
I think for her, the goal of this tournament and probably the goal of the next couple of tournaments for her is just to spend time on court, I think, and get used to the competitive grind again that comes with being on the tour. I got to see her live against Buzaniescu, and she didn't convince me in it. I mean, I know she did win in the end, but it wasn't overly convincing. It was very erratic. Her best was very good, but there were also some very poor patches throughout it. I think this is, in a weird way, it's probably a matchup that she probably likes to see in Brengle in her first match on court here, just because she's going to have to hit a lot of balls. She's going to have to cover the court well. It's going to be a good test of her fitness. I'm not really sold on her for the tournament. And I think, when you look at her price, things are obviously going to be very, very short for her just based off name and the fact she won the US Open a couple of years ago. It's going to take time for her to get her feel back on court and to find physically that level that she's going to need. She is going to come up against, if she did say face Brengle and maybe Bogdan, just to get out, just to get to the quarterfinal here, it's going to be a couple of interesting tests for her. So I'm going to stay away from her to begin with. But I think, if she does start to look a little bit more confident, you could maybe, towards the business end, maybe look at jumping in on Andreescu there. But, looking to the top part of this section, that's where it gets a little bit tricky because it is a pretty manageable section for the Canadian if she brings a half decent level.
I kind of like that you took the bait there a little bit. As much as I do agree that it's easy, some of these players might actually make her work. And if she isn't quite in tip-top shape, it could be a tough start for her. And it is a smaller tournament. Candace, what do you see here? What sticks out to you?
I mean, I think the first thing that stuck out was Begu defeating Podoroska in pretty facile fashion. And, Begu's one who's a bit interesting to me at a large price. I do think winning the tournament is a big ask, but I could see her making a bit of a run. She's beaten Blinkova before. Wong obviously could be a little bit difficult. I think they've only faced each other once before, and it was a number of years ago. But, some people have said it, and I know it's something I've really kind of preached a bit on these podcasts we've been doing early in the year, but I'm relying a lot on older players who have been able to kind of maybe handle circumstances better, handle quarantine better. They're in more of a routine. You know what you're going to get from them every time. And Begu, all things considered, you add in that victory over Podoroska, but she's been playing decently well. Obviously, the first round match over there in the Australian Open itself left a lot to be desired. But in the tournament the week prior, she had made a little bit of a nice run. She defeated Zhang over there. She defeated Jo Konta. And she was pretty tight for a match there with Osaka before ultimately losing to her. But it's the kind of form lines that should stack up well against a group like this. And so I'd be keen on having an eye on her and seeing how far she advances.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me. Anything else here, guys?
Nope, not from me.
All right. I think we're ready then to jump into our segments. Are we not?
Yes, we are. So shall we go back to we're going to go back alphabetical, or do you want to go the other way?
How do you decide. Because I don't want to mess it up. I want to make sure that you're comfortable.
I just want to make sure that I don't miss anyone. We will
start
with
you. Candace is going to make sure she's not on mute.
That too. I said I want to make sure I actually get mentioned. So whatever order means that I get mentioned.
Done. Locked in. Alex, who is your ace or who's your pick for the tournament?
As I start to look at this, and I kind of gave this away as we started, I really like this draw for Danielle Collins. I think that from the top half of the draw, it really comes down to Kenin versus her there. I think that she has all the tools to beat Kenin. I think she looked really well, actually, in the last couple of weeks playing the Australian Open. Obviously she lost to Pliskova, and I think she kind of broke down there a little bit. But she's playing some nice tennis, just wasn't able to quite hit her lines. And I don't think got, maybe the break or two that she really needed there. But sets up really nicely for her. I like the draw. And, given what we saw there kind of in the bottom half with Andreescu, with how nice that third quarter is, happy to stay away from that and go with Collins.
Perfect. Very, very sound reasoning. Candace, who have you gone for?
I ended up going with Bushkova for the victory. Spoke about it again when we went through the draw itself, but I like her portion of the draw. And more importantly than that, I like the way that she's playing. You can't say that for everybody in this group, whereas some of these players come in here after maybe disappointing performances. I thought she played fine. It was just against Svitolina, who's a tougher opponent. So I'm looking for Bushkova to rebound.
Fair. And I've gone for a player with a very similar style here, and I've actually gone with Daria Kasatkina. I think in her section, I think it's very attackable as well. Obviously strengthened now by the fact that Alizé Cornet's out of the section as well. I think she's looked solid again, beaten by Sabalenka, which there's nothing to be ashamed of with that, considering Sabalenka's form. So I've decided to side with her as my main pick. Now, if we head to the value picks, Alex, who have you sided with here?
I love Candace's pick to win, and although she's not my pick to win the tournament, and I know we're a little late here, folks, but pre-tournament she was 40-1 to win the tournament. I think that she should absolutely win this quarter. I think that she has a great chance to be competitive there in her half. Now, outrights are closed, obviously, for right now because they're playing. But before play started today, she was in the 25-ish to 1 range. I think outrights will open at some point later. If she is 15-1 or higher, grab some of that. If there's lucky enough to be quarter prices somewhere, again, this is a smaller event with the Australian Open going on. I'm not expecting, live quarter prices to be there between matches. Grab her at plus anything to win that quarter. That's a fantastic bet. I'm really surprised by how the market reacted to this. We talked about that quarter. We all loved her draw. We think she's a great pick to win that. Just doesn't make sense to me. So I think she's fantastic value. Again, as outrights open up after play completes today, tomorrow, or, whatever things work. It's hard. It's on the other side of planet Earth. But her 15-1 or better plus anything to win the quarter, I think is, a plus EV wager.
And I'll just skip over my description of my value pick because mine is also Bush. It's the same player. So we're going for Buskova again. Exactly what Alex said. And now moving on to Candace. Who have you gone with?
Clean sweep there for Bushkova. For my value, I actually went with Begu. Obviously had the victory over Podoroska. I think that was more Podoroska's fault than Begu's fault, but I do think you're going to see veteran players at this time of the year. Again, not only when some players are unfit, but when some players have maybe been aggravated by quarantine or the past year in general. Heck, we've all been, it's been a tough year for everybody. And I just think some of these older, maybe a little bit wiser, more experienced players have been able to handle that better. And so we've seen some of those types who are just consistent and who have been able to just maintain their consistent levels, have been able to come through in tournaments like this. Again, her form lines recently, prior to the Australian Open, were plenty good enough for me. So I do think she offers a little bit of value in what looks to be a pretty decent area of the draw now that Podoroska's out of it.
Makes perfect sense to me. And I wanted to pause here before we kind of move on to the next segment. Obviously, we all like Buskova here. I was just curious to see, did you guys agree on kind of the numbers that I was giving out? Again, if outrights open tomorrow, I don't think there will be quarter prices. If there are anything at plus money or greater than 2, if you're using decimal odds, again, 15-1 or better to win the tournament. Do those numbers make sense to you guys? Are you more bullish? Would you go even in tighter on some of those? How are you guys feeling on some of those numbers? Go ahead, Steve.
I think a lot of that quarter price will be dependent on who wins that Sasnovich versus Konta match. I think I'd be more interested in Buskova as an outright instead of, I think, if she can get through these are great tests when you look at the quality of this section and what's going on. I think I'd be more interested in taking a bigger price, I think, on the outright market here than getting too involved in quarter prices, considering the situation with this tournament. It's the second week of a slam. We're not really sure. We've just seen Cornet lose to Birrell in straight sets. There's a couple of quirky results that we've seen so far. Knowing that these players are one loss from flying out, that there's probably a couple more question marks. That I'd rather a small stake at something on the outright market at double figures than getting too bogged down, I think, into the quarters.
Yeah, I have a little interesting thing to add there, but Candace, why don't you jump in first and kind of give us your thoughts? What numbers are you looking for? How would you attack this? What are you hoping for when you wake up tomorrow? What are you going to drive to Nevada to do?
Yeah, I had similar thoughts to Steve in that I was more looking towards the larger outright prices. To me, there's even more uncertainty here because of the reason that he mentioned, that when these players lose, they're out of here. At least when it was the tournaments prior to the Australian Open, there was a bit more motivation because win or loss, you're stuck here, so you might as well make the best of it. For some players, I'm sure after all of this, they're eager to just go home. So a little bit more uncertainty in that regard from a motivational perspective, which leads me towards the larger prices. I would love your prices because in my head, I was thinking 10 to 12. So if we get 15, watch out, jackpot Nevada.
and maybe to foreshadow a little bit on what's coming here in the next segment. But there is a player in the fourth quarter who's soaking up a lot of value here, which I think really leads to what you guys are talking about. The outright price is absolutely more value to me than the quarter price. I just think the quarter here is kind of a layup for her. I appreciate, Steve, your respect for Jo Konta, but she's in Australia, and if there's anybody that wants to get the hell out of here, it's going to be her. And even if she is there, I'd have Buzkova favored in that match. So I would love for Jo Konta to be there and have a chance to bet Buzkova as a dog. I look at the top section, there isn't there, but there's also a player there down at the bottom who's a huge favorite to win this tournament, who, as we discussed, there's some question marks, who's kind of soaking up a lot of the value. So I think you're right. Although I like both, I see much more value in the outright price than the quarter price, given on what could happen there at the bottom.
I feel like you've given a good enough description of your overvalued player there being Konta. Did you want to add anything more?
No, that's really it. One of you guys are going to touch on that player there in the fourth quarter that I think is overvalued. But, Jo Konta here in the third quarter, she has a bye, which, from a pricing perspective, if you're going through and you're doing a good job of bookmaking, you have to give her a big leg up because it's a free match there. Sasnovich is someone that I've described a lot. She's kind of a measuring stick player for me, and Jo Konta is a good WTA player. So if she's motivated, interested in playing tennis in this match, she should be able to take care of Sasnovich. I'm not too worried there. But even if she does, I kind of think that she's going to get against Buzkova, and Buzkova is somebody that's just going to be throwing much more variety than she's interested to seeing. If this match is on a hot day and she's stuck outside doing this, going to love Buzkova to dog there. So happy to fade Konta here, and I think that she's driving some value not only for Buzkova but for other players.
Yep, that sounds good to me. Now, Candice, you and I have agreed on who our overvalued player is. Would you like to take it away?
Sure. I mean, I don't think it's that much of a surprise to people that the overvalued player in both of our eyes is Andreescu. To be frank, I could have made my overvalued player her or Kenin, and I probably would have been totally fine with it. I lean more to Andreescu being the true overvalued player, though, because her struggles right now obviously are physical, and whereas Kenin's are more mental, and neither of them is good for a tennis player, don't get me wrong. But you can at least have a chance if you're playing physically, if you're fit and you're there and you're playing decently. When you have mental struggles than you can if you're just not fit and not ready. And that's the case for Andreescu. It's one of those things where, on one hand, it's a little bit of a shame, but she always was going to have to go through this process. And, where she is at from 6 months from now, I'm sure it's going to be a very different place. So just excited to see the future. I'm glad she's back, but yeah, probably a bit too soon.
Yeah, and I completely agree there. So I think that rounds everything out for the WTA Phillip Island Trophy.
Indeed. Anything else, guys? Anything else you want to talk about here? Do we want to pimp anything? I don't know. How are we feeling?
Ooh.
Well, I guess we can probably announce that we are going to be back tomorrow, probably in about 22 or so hours from now. So we're going to be jumping on to give a little bit of an update of where things lie for the Australian Open to date, and then also have a little bit of a look ahead to the second week and where we think there might be some value, and have a look at some of the markets perhaps as well. So we'll be doing that. And I think we might even have a special guest joining us. I thought 3 was a crowd, but I think we can, I get the feeling we can sneak this 4th member in, I think, for this chat, and it should be a bit of fun.
It'll be nice for people to
cliffhanger.
It'll be nice to people to see a box. Does it box, or do we go 4 wide? Can we do a box?
No. I think we go into the box formation for those who do watch along live. So that should be it's
going to be like the Brady Bunch.
Exactly. Alrighty. Well, we might wrap it up there for now. Thanks for everyone who's watched along live, and for anyone who listens back on the podcast. If you do like what we're doing, please give us a follow, subscribe, rating, review, whatever works. And it's a little bit different, I think, everywhere, isn't it, at the moment, with what you can do based on podcasts. But thank you very much for tuning in, and we will be back in just under 24 hours to do it all again.